Welcome to ZigWheels. If you're a motorcycle enthusiast, which you should be since you're watching ZigWheels, you know we haven't had it any tougher than right now. So, in this difficult period, let's try and draw some inspiration from a man who has been practicing social distancing on a motorcycle since the year 1985. Here's someone who, to the Royal Enfield enthusiast, needs no introduction, but he is Royal Enfield's official historian. Please welcome Gordon May.
This is a cylinder head from a 1932 500 Bullet, so one of the first ever made. 1930s timing covers. That's the kind of thing I keep under my bed. In fact, I've got 4 drawers full of things I could keep bringing out and showing you.
To begin with, there is this one question about Royal Enfield. Given its revived popularity in India in the last decade, just over a decade now, whose bike is it anyway? Because of course its origins are British, but there were 2 significant revivals from the brand that happened purely in India. So who has the larger moral entitlement to the Royal Enfield brand?
I think without question, you can say it's an Indian brand now, with great British heritage. And I mean, the bikes originated in the UK. They were made here for 69 years. They've been made in India for 65 years now. But I don't think that's really the key point. What India has done, especially in recent times with the UCE, then the Himalayan, and now the wonderful 650 twins, is they've taken the machines to a whole new level. In terms of production, I think India surpassed what had been produced in the UK in numbers decades ago. And around the world now, it's recognised as an Indian brand. But there's still that great connection with the UK. Only a couple of years ago, the UK Technical Centre was opened at Bruntingthorpe. So there are research and development engineers there who work hand in hand and collaborate with the research and development engineers in Chennai. So I think that's a lovely combination. But yeah, the real answer would have to be it's an Indian brand.
Gordon, thank you. I think that was a very, very interesting take on this question. Now, getting a little deeper into your very role, you started a magazine called the Bulletin, which was in the year 2001, I believe. And I think that enjoyed a nice run of about, I think, just over 2 years. Now, firstly, what was the experience with compiling that magazine? And another question to add to that is, what other motorcycle in the world, given a choice, would you dedicate a specific magazine to?
My experience of doing the Bulletin, it was 30 issues, so 30 months, and it was an absolute labour of love. I did that because I was so passionate about Royal Enfield and the Bullets, and it was a very personal journey, going to meet people, owners, and telling stories about their bike and their relationship with their bike, as well as giving a lot of mechanical hints and tips and repair articles, restoration articles, and a bit of history mixed in there. The reason I stopped doing it was because it was something I was doing completely on my own. And after 30 months without a holiday and nobody to turn to and another deadline pressing, I thought I really need to move on and do something different. But I've really regretted it, and a lot of times, because I've missed the interaction with owners and their bikes. What other motorcycles? Well, obviously a lot of brands have actually done their own magazine. I can think now of Harley and Suzuki, who both have current magazines produced by the companies. I know Triumph has, I think BMW has. For me personally, it would have to be a magazine about something I was passionate in. So I couldn't write about agriculture or soap manufacturing, I probably couldn't write about a motorcycle that I didn't have a real connection with. So I think to answer your question, there are lots of other motorcycles that one could write about, but not one that I would choose to write about.
You seem to have a very clever way with getting out of uncomfortable questions. So I will ask you another one. And this is one that has been most relevant in the last decade, especially since the birth of the unit construction engine, which is what started with the Thunderbird and then the classics in India. And it is a never-ending debate between the virtues of the cast iron engine versus the UCE. Now, what is, in very brief, what is the cleverest life hack to excuse yourself out of a cast iron versus UCE debate?
I actually don't think there is a debate. What debate could there be? I mean, both are motorcycles that you would have and love riding. I mean, a cast iron owner, I would assume, would want to have a UCE, and a UCE would want to have a cast iron at some point if you were a die-hard Royal Enfield enthusiast. I mean, the cast iron engines, obviously it's very charismatic, it's got a lot of character on the plus side, and a great feel from riding them. And if you love hands-on stuff, well, there's plenty of opportunity to work and interact with your machine. But the UCE being a modern classic, it's a lot less stressful in a way. I just don't see a debate. I see the positives in them both.
What are the 5 most important things that you have to know to qualify as a certified Royal Enfield nut?
Gosh, well, I don't think it's what carburetor was fit to the first 1949 350 Bullet. I don't think that would qualify you. I don't know, the year of the first Bullet, the year the Bullet was launched, perhaps, which was 1932. Rather than knowing something, how about qualifying in a different way? Coming out of lockdown, imagine restrictions are eased today. What's the first thing you want to do? Go and see your girlfriend or your boyfriend? Go to the pub with your mates for a pint? Go get a haircut? It's a lot of people, including myself, need those. Or is it first thing you want to do is get out on your bike? I think that's probably as good a way as qualifying you as a die-hard nut.
No.
What else? Maybe perhaps if you're an Indian Royal Enfield rider, that you would know some of the models that used to be made here in the UK, some of the more unusual ones like the Model Z sidecar, or maybe know a bit about the airflow fairing, something a bit not mainstream. Perhaps if you were an owner in the international markets, you might know a bit more about Royal Enfield's machines in India, not just the Bullet. Some of the bikes that used to be made in India, such as the Mini Bullet or the Explorer or the Mofa or the Fantabulous.
So Gordon, there is this thing about classic motorcycle enthusiasts that under their beds are usually where they keep their most valuable treasures. What lives under your bed?
Yeah, well, in the drawers that I pull out, unfortunately, it's not socks and underwear and T-shirts. It's bits of rare motorcycle parts that I'm hoping to one day form into a complete bike. And here's one example. And this is, just take the cylinder, take it off. This is a cylinder head from a 1932 500 Bullet, so one of the first ever made. So underneath my bed is lots of old motorcycle parts. This one's particularly interesting because back in 1932, 33, 34, the 500 Bullet had a 4-valve cylinder head. I don't know if you can see those valves there. And exposed valves. So these things, twin ported, these things straight off the factory line would do nearly 90 miles an hour, and with very moderate tuning, which could be done by anybody at home, very simple tuning, could be taken up to and beyond 100 miles an hour. Cast iron, really heavy lump, but wonderful to see them running with the valves bouncing in and out. So that's what I keep underneath my bed, and things like 1930s timing covers.
Wow,
You can see the design here of the oil pumps that became so famous on bullets right through the 50s and onwards. But of course, by the 50s, there was actually an oil filter underneath this. In the 1930s, the Royal Enfields didn't have oil filtration in that way, so more frequent oil changes.
That is beautiful.
That's the kind of thing I keep under my bed. In fact, I've got 4 drawers full of things I could keep bringing out and showing you. It's a sad affliction.
I hope you have the rest of the motorcycle as well.
I do of the 4-valve Bullet, yes I do. I don't of this one.
I wish we had all day to do this, but unfortunately that's not how YouTube works. So we'll move on for now to the next question I have for you, which is that since you've traveled a lot with the Bullet and you've spent a lot of time around Royal Enfields, is there, and like you said in an answer to an earlier question, these are motorcycles with a lot of character. There are lots of sort of unique qualities to them. But is there something about the Bullet that you still haven't sort of gotten your head around? Do you have a sort of pet peeve about the Bullet?
Pet peeve?
Yeah.
If it be the older models, whether they came from Redditch or India, so the cast iron ones, my pet peeve would be the gearbox. So the Albion gearbox was effectively 1930s design, foot change design, that was then modified and evolved into becoming this 4-speed foot change gearbox. And the box that was built in India up until 2008 was still that basic design. It was very solid, very dependable, but for me the pet peeve would be the step between 3rd and 4th gear. Right. Which it just was never quite right. Yeah. Especially if you were tackling a big hill and you wanted your momentum to get you to the top, but 4th gear just wouldn't quite do it, and 3rd would be revving like crazy. With the UCE models, I would have to say probably, and it is petty, maybe the exhaust, the silencer, which is very long and aesthetically, to my eye, isn't that pleasing. And I understand why it has to be so for emissions, and keeping an old single-cylinder overhead valve engine, pushrod single, working with modern, current emission standards is a challenge. So I understand the silencer, but to my eye, it's not very appealing. On the plus side of that, though, many owners swap them out and put in one that's a lot shorter, and I think that's one of the really nice things about Royal Enfield, is that you can do that to the bikes, you can personalise them, and it's okay. There's a lot of classic bikes, and of course I'm speaking from a European perspective here, where people would come up to you and say, oh, that's the wrong nut and bolt on that for that year, or that's a 1954 silencer, not a 1955 one, as should be on your bike. And actually that doesn't happen with Royal Enfields, and that's really refreshing, is that, people can, I like what you've done with that.
All right, so now my next question is more personal. Given that you've written a lot of books and of course traveled around the world, you've also ridden from the UK to India on your 500. Was it your 500 single?
Yeah, 1953.
Wow, really? So, okay, firstly, we'll start off with something light. Have you actually ever been stranded on any of your long rides? And if yes, what is the most inventive you've had to be in terms of getting a fix on your motorcycle?
Have I ever been stranded? Yeah, I have. But never seriously. And I think the first thing is about preparation. And I'm very lucky. There's a couple of guys here in the UK are superb engineers and really dedicated to getting my old bikes just so before I set off. And so preparation's really important. And then being inventive when things go wrong, then there's a lot you can do with gaffer tape and cable ties. With the nail, I've used nails off the road before to fix one problem. A Coke can that you cut up and make shims out of for a side stand that's flapping around all over the place. Of course, you can be inventive, but I think the main thing from my experience, is to relax. And not to look upon it as a problem, but to look upon it as an opportunity when things go wrong. Because, look, we go on our bikes, we have this, when we go on an adventure, we have this opportunity to get out there and experience the world from the seat of our motorcycle. And those experiences are fabulous. I mean, apart from the joy of riding your bike every day, there's the landscapes, the architecture, the smells, that are all different. If you come from the UK, there's a chance to be in a better climate, but change of climates, different foods that you'll experience. But the main thing for me, and I'm sure for most travellers that we take from these journeys, is the chance to meet people, and especially the connections you make with people, the people that touch your heart. And when something goes wrong, whether you fall off your bike, whether you break down, get a puncture, I've learned to look upon those as an opportunity to experience meeting people. And it's always worked out really positively in that way. And I could tell you so many stories. Would take up hours of this interview. Just talking about the amazing people that have come along when something's gone wrong. And so in those circumstances, more than being inventive about a fix, I think it's also about relaxing and trusting that things will turn out all right, and they do.
I think those are absolutely golden words for anyone with even the slightest interest in motorcycle travel. The way you summed up experience, opportunity, adventure, and of course connection. I think it sums up why so many of us today choose to travel on motorcycles. And that actually brings me on to a more motorcycle specific question, which is what is your take on the adventure motorcycle as it is known today? Is it more a sort of conformity driven excess, given that they're all pretty much the size of the average elephant? Or do you think there is actually some merit in it? Do you think there is actually some basis for it to exist in this form for a very long time? What's your take on it, having traveled on motorcycles which most people would consider fit only for a museum, and you've been around the world on bikes like those? So how do these motorcycles, what do you think of them?
Well, I look at these big adventure bikes, 1000cc, 1250cc, and you have to admit the engineering, the design. It's awesome. I mean, these things are so amazingly well constructed, and the technology that's there is incredible. But that makes them complex, and it makes them expensive, very, very expensive, and it makes them unwieldy. So you try to stop one of those big bikes falling over, especially if you're on sand or snow, and you've got a problem, and you've also got a problem picking it up afterwards as well. And then, of course, we talk about expense, but there's this whole accessories market as well that goes hand in hand with the adventure bikes, and you can spend a small fortune on accessories to go with your big adventure bike. I think one of the things about the Himalayan, so I'm speaking obviously from a Royal Enfield perspective, is that it's refreshingly simple and refreshingly inexpensive, and while still being durable and hardy, it can take the knocks, it can take falling over, but you've got a chance of picking it up quite, compared with something with a 1250 boxer engine, perhaps. I say I really respect the engineering. They're amazing bits of machinery.
Now, Gordon, I'll move on to my next question. which is to do more with your present role with Royal Enfield. And one of the questions I have to ask you about it is firstly, how do you decide which historical Royal Enfield nameplate you must revive, or and in fact, more importantly, which are the Royal Enfield nameplates that you are fiercely sort of protective about, that you'd rather just reserve to history and never revive?
Well, as the historian, I have absolutely no say in those decisions whatsoever. There is a really great team of people who work on the future development and plans for the bikes, and it is them that obviously come up with the ideas of what's coming next, both in terms of the machines and the names. From a personal point of view, I don't think there is a name that should be left alone necessarily, although maybe some of the names aren't really appropriate, where maybe British Royal Enfield got it wrong in the first place. So for example, the first Meteor, great name, Constellation, great name, and then Interceptor, so these were bikes through the 50s into the 60s.
Gordon, there's a question I wanted to ask you. Who is the designer of the Bullet in its existing form as we've known it since the late 40s?
So in the late 40s, so 1947, the Bullet was designed by Ted Pardoe, who was the chief designer at Royal Enfield, in conjunction with Tony Wilson-Jones, who was the head of the development department. He was the chief engineer. And together they came up with the swinging arm Bullet, which was first seen in March 1948. And really that basic design continued forward right until today, although the engine's been completely changed subsequently.
I bet people would struggle to find the answer to that question, no matter how hard they looked up on the internet. So, right. So now I think I'm pretty much. I have many more questions to ask you, but that's perhaps for another time. But before we conclude, I'd like to put you through a bit of let's say like a rapid fire round. Yes, and they're not going to be very. I think they're very simple questions as well. So no putting you on the spot there. But
right,
whenever you're ready, right?
Go for it.
Okay, singles or twins?
Singles.
Parallel twins or V twins?
I've got a parallel twin and I love it. So I would love to have a V twin.
Okay, cast iron or UCE?
Cast iron.
Right. Cafe racer or tourer?
My heart says cafe racer, but my brain says tourer. Yeah.
Fantastic. The last one is carburetors or fuel injection?
Oh, this is tough. Fuel injection just makes so much more sense. Like UCE makes so much more sense, but carburation's got its own personal charm. Can I sit on the fence?
All right, you've been very, very, very kind and very insightful. So you can be on the fence for this very last question that we've asked you. But Gordon, it was an absolute pleasure to listen to you, to your perspective. I'm sure this is not enough, not only for the Royal Enfield enthusiasts who are watching, but also enthusiasts of motorcycles, whether modern or classic. And it has been such a great learning experience having you here speak to us. Before we let you go, Gordon, is there something you want to say to your viewers, especially the ones watching in India?
Yeah, I hope the situation improves rapidly for everybody, and that we can soon get out of this situation and get out on our bikes. But until then, do stay at home as much as possible, stay safe, take care, and enjoy your motorcycling when the first chance comes along.
Thank you so much, Gordon. Guys, if you like this video, don't forget to share it with your friends, especially the friends who are very bored during this lockdown and who are raring to go out on their motorcycles. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to ZigWheels. And until we all get to a better place, please stay home, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of your motorcycles, and we will catch you very soon again. Until next time.